Welcome to House of Strauss. I am thrilled to introduce to you Eric Rubin, professional sports gambler. And I say introduce to you because I don't think you have a public profile as of yet, Eric. I think this is, you are making an introduction to the people. You are stepping out from behind the curtain. How are you?
Good. Yes, I don't. And I'm glad to be here. I know we've been in touch talking about doing a podcast for a little bit. So I'm glad this is my first one ever. A podcast newbie.
I think this is just an unusual thing that we can do here. I should say to the audience, to properly introduce you, Eric's a real guy. This is a real sports bettor. This isn't just a tout. This isn't just somebody giving you picks, although I'm sure there's a market for that sort of thing, but that's not what we're here to do. This is somebody who's actually in the weeds of the industry and has a lot of thoughts on how it all goes in this crazy new era where sports betting has been legalized. But just to ground the conversation, this is what you've been doing professionally since graduating college, or do I have that correct? How did you wind up here?
I wound up here by just like kind of everyone else, starting betting on sports, starting by losing and understanding, okay, I probably have to switch up my strategy and figure out, is there an edge? I can't continue losing because I don't have unlimited funds. And talking to some people and kind of figuring things out on my own, I was able to start in small markets such as like NBA props and NFL props. And then almost like a decade later, work myself up to bigger markets like NFL first halves and NBA sides. But yeah, I've been doing this for like 8 or 9 years now.
Are you at liberty to say what's the most you've ever made in a year?
No.
Oh, I mean, I have an idea. We've talked in private a little bit, and I'm just trying to lend some legitimacy because people do question. I'm trying to prove that you have a grounding and a certain cachet when it comes to this industry. But you know what? Eric proved it right there. If he was full of it, he would have thrown a number at you. But instead, he wants to keep it a little close to the vest right there. So just trust me, folks. That is what I will say. And you've been nice enough to give me a range of topics, but I do want to start it right here. We're going to get into some of the nitty gritty of what's going on with the industry, but I'm fascinated by your perspective and also the perspective I'm seeing from some other sports gamblers who are sounding a societal alarm. Because when I think about sports gamblers, I don't think about the most touchy-feely, empathetic people. They're a little bit hard-edged, and that is including and especially Haralabob Vulgaris, who professional NBA gambler who worked for the Dallas Mavericks. Haralabob, I'm using his nickname, he's got a hard edge. He's got a sarcasm. He's caustic. But he puts out this alarm right here. I'm going to read it if you don't mind. Legalized sports betting as it currently stands will devastate America in a similar fashion to the opioid epidemic. At a bare minimum, I'd recommend these changes. 1, limit ads. Sports betting ads should be restricted, especially those targeting youth whose decision-making isn't fully developed. 2, no credit cards. Ban credit card deposits to prevent gambling with money people don't have. 3, protect vulnerable bettors. Prevent sites from exploiting problem gamblers or VIPs with higher custom limits while simultaneously banning or restricting professionals or winning gamblers. As someone that made a living betting on sports in mostly unregulated, quote, outlaw markets, these are my personal views. I can see how it may come across as hypocritical to some, but thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Curious what changes, if any, others would make. ? This is a perspective. We can get into any specifics you might agree with or disagree with there, but I'll just throw that out to you. What's up with people from behind the curtain coming out to warn everybody? What's going on with that?
So I almost want to address, he says it sounds a little bit hypocritical, which I personally disagree with, but I could see how the attack, and I think that tweets specific comments where a professional gambler doesn't want anyone else to bet But being in the weeds, he understands how tiny the margins are in winning, how strong the book's house edges are, how the advertisements target, the most vulnerable and susceptible people to, having an addiction. So I think he actually has unbelievable perspective on it. And he's probably one of the best NBA bettors, if not the best NBA bettor ever. But to address the advertisements, that's my biggest problem. I'm super pro gambling, super pro the legalization. I'm just extremely wary of the inability to watch any sporting event here in New York City without being bombarded after the first quarter, after the first timeout. You get the halftime lines, you get the third quarter. I mean, I have the live updates of the entire FanDuel market regarding that game and oftentimes other games while watching whatever, the Knicks or the Yankees. And I just think that we're not at the point in time right now where there's any lobbying for anti-gambling or anything of this can be a societal nightmare. I think there's some statistics like bankruptcy rates in legalized states are up. And just given how, like he said, the youth sees it, and all the biggest influencers are all sponsored by, the sports books, and then all the sports podcasts and the content is sponsored by the sports books. So you almost feel, if I'm not betting, am I left out?
And it's almost the opposite. I mean, it's not the opposite as far as if I'm not betting, am I left out of societal practice? But the feeling that these companies try to stoke that you're going to miss out on winning a bunch of money, it is the opposite, because as we have talked about on this podcast, and still a lot of people don't know this, Eric, a lot of people are surprised when I talk to them and I go, they don't let you win. And people go, really? I go, yeah, they start noticing that you're winning, they cut you off with algorithmic efficiency and you can't put bets down. And that's how this all works. Could you lend a little bit more substance to what I'm saying there about how they make it seem like, oh my God, you can win this or that, but they effectively ensure that it is absolutely impossible to come away with a big winning. I know people would say that's how casinos are, but you can have a great night at a casino in a way that I think is a little more difficult to do big scale in sports gambling.
Exactly. So that's one of the biggest problems. I'm going to get to that in a second, but I'm most frustrated by all of these sports gambling accounts like BR Betting and ESPN Bets and anything sponsored by the sports books. They want to sell you on the lowest possible ROI for you, which seems like an unbelievable bet, which are these long shot parlays. And what you do in these parlays is you stack bets on top of each other. And what seems to be a great payout, I bet a little bit like a lottery ticket to win a ton. I don't think the general public understands that the house's edge is multiplied when you keep stacking these bets.
Yeah.
And an average that the houses hold, or how much money they're making per bet on a straight bet, is maybe 5, 6, 7%. And on a parlay, when you're combining 6, 7, 8 bets in one, is closer to 30, 40%. So all of these accounts are showing, this guy, look at this guy, he cooked on this parlay, he won $540,000 on this $60 bet. This could be you. And the books are licking their chops, posting all of this, because I think it gives the rush of, I could bet a little and be rich and win a ton. But effectively, not only should that parlay mathematically pay you way more than they're actually paying you, but their edge is so strong on that they love when you win, because it creates an advertisement in itself that we could post this. This guy's super happy. He won the $5 to win 200,000. And we want that action. That is the most profitable action on our end as DraftKings or FanDuel, right? So they're pumping essentially the worst possible bet you could make on the homepage, on Twitter, Instagram, any advertisement. Right. So that's my biggest problem that's one of my biggest problems is the the parlay game. And you go on their homepage, and last night, Monday Night Football, it has Shannon Sharp's face on there with the Club Shay Shay parlay. And there was one that was called, like, I think DraftKings had it's like a shake and bake with Baker Mayfield, a few of his props combined with, the Bucks winning. And then I looked at the bet, I expanded it, and it didn't even have any prices attached to the bet. It just had, plus 1,200 at the bottom, but it just read Bucks money line and Baker Mayfield passing yards 250. But Bucks money line should have a price attached to it, right? Whether it's, I don't know what it was last night, plus 130, but you don't know if they're giving you plus 105. You don't even know if they're skewing the odds. They could be a favorite in that bet. So the lack of price sensitivity in the first place is what's killing the recreational bettor. But then they advertise you these parlays that you don't even really know what the prices you're betting. You're just like, oh, and under it has 2,000 people place this bet. So it's almost like building a community. So I think
that's an interesting aspect. Well, right. I didn't think about the building a community part. Sorry to interrupt, but that's something that didn't even occur to me as part of what gets you in. I mean, some of the strategies and ways they try to get people involved in it, very interesting and a little bit dark. And I want to make something clear. I'm not anti-gambling either, just like Eric's not anti-gambling. I actually like sports gambling, especially from an intellectual perspective of trying to find the market inefficiency. And done the way it has traditionally been done, I look at it a little bit like blackjack, where the house has an edge, but it's not a massive edge. And if you're with your buddies at a bachelor party in Las Vegas, it's fun to put some bets down at the sports book on a few games. That's fun to me. I like that. I think it's cool. We're talking about something else that's happened at a scale that's new, and I do think is preying on a hole in human psychology to a degree. I'm not sure what the mathematical principle is, but combined probability in the mind just doesn't feel as unlikely as it is. It just doesn't. 2 free throws for a 50% free throw shooter hitting both consecutively is 25%, but it doesn't feel that way necessarily. Perhaps that's not the best example, but you know the principle I'm getting at. And you effectively create a scenario where it becomes like the slot machines, where the edge is it's just so tilted to the house, but it doesn't feel that way. And you've got all these people chasing this payout that's never going to come with these crazy parlays. And that is the growth engine for these businesses. That's why they're pushing the parlays. That's why if you watch these gambling ads, it's parlay, 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 because the stuff I like, the stuff that's a little bit more like blackjack, the, hey, who's going to win? What's the spread? That traditional thing, that doesn't pay the bills. It's this other thing that seems to be what's paying the bills, and that means soaking the consumer.
Absolutely. You never see a bunch of straight bets being advertised. You don't see, Dodgers game 1 or Dodgers first 5. They want you to see, the lotto tickets. But going back to buddies at a bachelor party, and how that could be a good thing and build some camaraderie. The difference is with the legalization, it's in your bed. It's when you wake up, it's at work. And with the 24/7 markets of betting, it could be 1 p.m. East Coast, and I have Ukrainian ping pong to bet on live. And I could bet on European basketball, and, tennis is year round. They have like a 6-week break. Played all around the world. And so I could pretty much bet on a tennis match every day of the year. So it never stops. And once you're a little bit hooked, I think it's extremely, extremely difficult to stop. And I've, heard and experienced many stories of something has to come to a halt, whether it's your wife finding out that you have a problem because you need to show her your financial statements because you're buying a house. Whether it's I actually can't make rent anymore. I've tanked my savings. And the way that, the gambling addiction, I think, and I know it's a sensitive addictions. I'm not too familiar with a bunch of them. But it is a sensitive topic, but you don't go from 100 to 91 or 100 to 83 and then stop and realize, oh, wow, that was an issue. The $100 goes to zero or very, very close to zero. And then what we've talked about is an interesting point. When you do lose, if I'm going home from work every day and watching the Warriors, and my bets predominantly are comprised of the Warriors spread or something to do with any derivative of that game, and I keep losing money, does my interest in the sports team dwindle? Do I have the same care for Kuminga's relationship with Steve Kerr? Do I have the same care for, Moses Moody's contract and all the intricacies that I once was a big fan of? I've watched, pretend scenario, but I've watched the Warriors for 4 or 5 months this year. It's now February. I keep losing betting on them, and it's enough. I can't afford to lose anymore. Is your recreational fandom going to continue? I think that's an interesting point that is seldomly brought up. And I think it would be hard to have money on a game for 5 straight months, realize your bankroll or net worth, was chopped in whatever. And then we're going to go back to watching the games with no money on it, with no rush, with nothing attached to it except pure fandom. It's hard to believe.
That makes intuitive sense. And that is a bigger, broader issue for the leagues. And if it hurts them at scale, as you're suggesting it might, then they will have richly deserved it, perhaps. It makes sense to me. The Niners season is currently a mess. I don't even want to engage in anything Niners right now from a pure fandom perspective. Now, if they had lost me my savings, I can't even imagine how much I would want to dissociate from NFL just completely. It's just unimaginable. And it's this other thing where we haven't done studies, but we have a lot of anecdotal to suggest that the fan behavior in response to losing money can get to a really bad place. I wrote about this last week where you had this situation, Breonna Stewart, WNBA star, her wife, some vicious emails were sent by an anonymous fan, homophobic email, and it was this story leading ESPN on the NBA page, on NBA Today, and it was all framed as this indictment of society about hate, as though homophobia might be on the rise or hate might be on the rise, and people can have those conversations. There wasn't much in the way of data to underpin it, but this elephant in the room from my perspective was, well, ESPN, you've got your own sports book. You're pushing people to gamble on the WNBA finals. Scenario that I don't think was that frequently gambled on before. I'll just go out on a limb and say that. By some people, yes, but not broad-based, and certainly nothing you were pushing on your homepage, ESPN.com. And all of a sudden, there's a fan who's acting viciously, and you're going, oh my God, what is this epidemic? It must be hate. It must be homophobia. Maybe, and just maybe, you've got gamblers who are directing a kind of vitriol at athletes that doesn't reflect well on the person. I'm not excusing such behavior. And if you lose money, you lost the money. You shouldn't be tracking down the wife of a WNBA star. But to me, it was this elephant in the room where they're indicting society, but not asking of themselves, are we involved in something that's perhaps exposing the athletes to more of something ugly than what we were involved in before? To me, it was obvious that this is at least a possibility, and something that, even if it wasn't the case in this specific instance, would contribute to more instances like it. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I see it a ton on the WTA, honestly, because I think WTA as in the women's professional tennis. And I think almost the biggest degenerate bettor with the least amount of control is the one DMing some of the players on Instagram, right? And it adds up when those matches are in the middle of the day and you have an addiction, and that is what you're betting on, this women's match in Shanghai in the China Open, or in Switzerland in the middle of the summer. And I think that the craziest part about the DMing the athletes, it's so popular. And then the athletes have been, posting it, and whether it's extremely racist behavior or just taunting them to disgusting degrees, they're now starting to come out and say things like "fuck your parlay," or like we don't care about your parlay," and which is extra funny because athletes who most of them have no idea any gambling terms, they know what a parlay is because this terminology and the slang of it now is on Twitter. You see, what are we cooking in our lay tonight? What are we putting in our lay? And short for parlay. And it's reached the athletes. And again, like that it just goes back to the most popular iteration of a losing bet is the ones that's the one that society knows the most, right? So these players that are being DM'd, they know what a parlay is. It's just the feedback loop is insane in that regard. But yeah, I think losing in general creates anger, and if there's a way, to instead of maybe going on a walk or putting your phone or computer down and kind of getting off of tilt when you lose in a bad beat. Oh, here's a way to get off tilt. Let me call this person a ridiculous name and blow up their DMs and go to their family. And it's crazy. It does happen, and it happens a lot. And I think at this point, the athletes assume when they're DM'd that it is from a gambler or someone who lost money.
And some of these athletes aren't crazy famous. I'm imagining that on the WTA, I don't think they have a ton of followers, and all of a sudden they're getting tracked down with this sort of personal vitriol. I'm fascinated by the whole idea of pro-social gambling versus anti-social gambling that we were touching on earlier, because again, that bachelor party kind of gambling, I think, is fun. I think fantasy football with you and your friends, keeping in touch after high school, I think that is generally good. That's fun. It's social. There's something about the loneliness. Have you seen that Eric Andre ad? I'm trying to remember if it's for DraftKings or FanDuel, where the comedian Eric Andre.
Yeah, I think I saw that a while ago.
It's dark, man. I like that guy's comedy, his fake talk show, really funny, but I almost just look at him different because the ad is just so grim, where he's showing up almost in this guy's thoughts as the devil on his shoulder going, "It's parlay time." And it's a guy alone in his apartment making all these different bets on the NFL. And that's where really you don't want to think other people are evil, but there's just something about, we're taking you from the fun fantasy football you and your buddies setting to, hey, this is what you should be doing. You should be alone in your apartment and you should be doing this by yourself. Watching that sent a chill down my spine. Maybe I'm a little sensitive, but did you see that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I saw that a while ago. I think it was like over a year ago. I vaguely recall it was a little sketch. I do want to touch on fantasy football because I think I personally don't play. I don't have time for setting the lineups, and I've never totally enjoyed it that much. But that's a one-time payment to your group of friends. It's not weekly betting, although it's weekly paying attention and weekly sweating the plays and getting on top of the news and finding value in different players. It's a one-time payment, whether it's $50 or $5,000 to your group of friends. There's a huge social aspect of, the winner wins and has bragging rights for the next year, and the loser has to do, some dumb shit in the street. That's usually really funny. And that keeps, you're right, the college friend groups intact. It keeps people in touch with each other. You make trades during the workday. Sometimes you team up on some of the weak teams. And that is a great, I think, controlled environment for sports betting. One thing I wanted to say, Ethan, about the like bachelor party example and sports betting in general, and why I don't think I think it's very different from going to a casino and gambling, is one, you don't feel the seediness of the cigarette smoke and looking around and feeling like, maybe this isn't the best place for me. But two, I think if you were to sit outside Yankee Stadium in Game 3 coming up and do one of the TikTok style street interviews and interview 100 fans and ask them, do you think you could make a living playing roulette, blackjack, baccarat, or slots? And I think you'd get an overwhelming majority, maybe 95% or higher, that would say, no, I don't. I think the house edge is too strong. And if they don't word it like that, it's gambling is bad and you can't win. On the same token, if you were to ask the same question and maybe phrase it like, if you did enough research and you spent enough time searching teams and players, do you think you could be a long-term profitable sports bettor? That's the percent that I'm scared to know what the answer is. Because from my experience, it's the same number as, trying to win counting cards or being a plus EV slot player, which is under 1%, like probably under 0.1%. You have very, very little shot. But I think that in that street interview, you're getting 60, 70, 80% of people that think they could win.
I'd be fascinated. For those who don't know, being a plus EV slot player, there are these people who observe what's happening with the slot machines and when one of these slots is more likely to pay out. And I'm sure it's a big cat and mouse game to scope out those machines. And that's a whole thing. That's a thing people do, but you have to be an unusual kind of person to do that.
Right.
I don't know what people... My intuition on how people respond to that, I actually think people think that it's harder to beat the house than it actually is, but they don't know the other thing that we mentioned earlier, that once you start beating the house, you're not allowed to start beating the house, and a lot of the effort as a professional gambler is more in getting bets down than it is in finding the edge. I know you could call me arrogant, but I did this in front of people. I had a picks column. I know that if you let me get the bets down, yes, I could earn a living being an NBA gambler. I know that's the truth. I could earn a good living if you did not put any limits on me. I could do that. My wife would not like it. She would not appreciate the time and energy that I would have to put into that, and it would be antisocial. It would be bad for me. So maybe it's good that it's actually impossible. It's actually impossible because, again, they don't let you. They don't let you. Once you start going good, you're not allowed to. So to what you're saying, I don't know what the survey data would be on that. I actually think people would be a little more humble than what you might think, but I do think you're getting at something real, which is that everybody thinks they know something about sports. They think they know something about sports in the way that they don't think they know something about some of these other things. And that's the beauty of it. And that's really the root of a lot of tension between sports media people and their audience, is that the sports media person isn't going to be right all the time. They're going to be wrong probably about as much as their audience is. And the audience is annoyed and mad because they feel like, I know sports, I watch the game. What is this dumbass telling me what matters? Everybody thinks they know. And then that can be conflated into this whole, well, I can do this and I can beat the house, and you win a little bit. And yeah, it's not so easy, even if you do have an edge.
Right. So at exactly what you're saying, at the recreational sports books, such as FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars, the first sign of competency, the first sign of I'm a non-degenerate gambler, I'm not parlaying the Cowboys, Yankees, and Chiefs every weekend. It's very easy for them to profile you. We call it closing line value if I'm beating the market line. So if I'm betting a college basketball first half total, right, and I'm betting under 62.5, and that game closes at 58.5, regardless if there was 200 points scored and I got smoked on the play, I am now profiled as some sort of client who could potentially do some harm to them, because I have been ahead of the market since I placed a bet at 11:07 in the morning and tip-off says I beat the line by 4 points. That is an absolute no-go for the books. So if the books were sharp, or if they employed the correct trading teams, they could use my information, take my bet, move the line, maybe take my bet again and move the line. They don't want to do that. What they do want to do is, let's say on a first half total, if I had just opened an account, maybe I could get $1,000 to $2,000 down. The first few bets might go in. It really depends on who's working and how closely they're looking. But by bet 7, if you're consistently beating it, you will see a limit on your account close to $1, maybe $10. And they even if you don't win and you show a sign of you have potential of winning, your account is absolutely cooked. So the idea that you could, quote unquote, get rich from having good information or being a great bettor, my job is playing a cat and mouse game with the books. My job is to hide my action through many accounts, through multiple different people. We call them beards, and play a game of pretending to show action that looks like something that maybe it isn't, right? But the general public, when they see these huge bets, which oftentimes, one, are photoshopped, two, again, I said I started in NBA props, right? So if tonight I wanted to bet Jalen Brunson under, right, they're probably limited to like a clean account that just got opened is maybe $500 to $1,000. When you start winning, that won't last. And then so if you see these huge bets like Patrick Mahomes under 240 yards for 25,000, I think it signals to the public like, oh my God, if I had this kind of money to bet and I was sharp, or if I thought that I could beat, quarterback yards totals, I can make a ton of money. But where my brain goes is, if you're allowed to bet $25,000 on a Patrick Mahomes under, you've probably accumulated $500,000, if not more, in losses, and they're happy to give you the limits that you want, and they're happy to take anything. So, a lot of the viral sports tickets, they're either, not even real, or, the tout or guy who's posting this is, betting one game on one side at one sports book and going to the other one and betting the other side, taking the small, big loss, and then posting the winner like, hey, here's my 6-figure win. Like, it's just so fraudulent across the board.
And it seems like they're more likely to take action from a celebrity because it's free advertising. So yeah, they don't want to lose, but if Floyd Mayweather posts a win, then it can actually spread some awareness. I know there's a confounder there, which is that sharps like to then use celebrities as fronts and a beard, as you put it, and that's part of it. It is, God, it's just so crazy. I mean, this might be a bit of a digression, but I'm fascinated by how the books and the people involved in this new Wild West just are understanding human psychology. And we talked about the loneliness. I did this story. It kind of blew up into this whole controversy that had nothing to do with this, but the Cavender twins were or are these basketball players that became very popular in college basketball and through NIL, and they were attractive and blonde. So that was part of the story and it became a whole thing. But I wasn't as interested perhaps in the elements of the story that blew up when they got mad at me in the aftermath. It was this company Bettor that they were involved with, which I think was backed by Jake Paul. And they had this guy named Derek, who was this performative mush. He was this scrawny guy, and all of their comedy sketches were Derek losing, and oh my God, Derek loses again. And it's like, oh my God, I lost again. And it's this really broad comedy of this intentionally dorky guy who then loses. And then they had these videos they were putting all out on TikTok and everywhere else of him hanging with the Cavender twins, and he loses and they win on a Miami game, and they're mocking him and laughing at him. And I swear to God, I do think the whole intent of this was, this guy's a loser. This guy lost, but he's hanging with these attractive blonde twins. He's losing, but there's also something good happening. They're kind of embarrassing him, but he's with them. I don't know if that's an effective strategy, but it was just this crazy look at what's going on here and how they're trying different things to try to get the young male consumer. And I mean, I don't even know what's involved in the research they do or how intuitive it all is, but there is a whole game being played to get into the minds of young men, to get the dollars out of them, that I don't think is being covered enough as it's happening.
Completely agree. To piggyback off that, my two biggest frustrations of the industry are, one, the advertising, and two, the touts. Nobody bothers me more than touts, but I've kind of accepted recently that if you're getting betting advice or financial advice from a guy who's taking a stack of cash, putting it to his ear, having two models pose with him in a yellow Ferrari in the street of Miami, and you think that his POY, play of the year, has any chance of being like, plus EV, even a little bit, or any chance of being a good bet, or having sustained success, I think it's on the consumer at that point. But if it's a 17-year-old or someone's brain who's not as developed, and this guy looks cool, he's on a yacht with models, he's got a nice car, he posts the watches, he posts the cash. There's so many of these Vegas Dave type guys who's like the OG scammer of the tout industry. And he's the one he's went viral sitting courtside at Lakers games with those expensive purses. And I think he had like 4 of them on the floor. I forgot what brand it is. It's like a $50,000 purse. He had them lined up next to his wife or girl or whatever. And, he's posting his tickets, and he sells some sort of like NFL package. And here are my 10 bets for the week. And I think that part of the industry is the most pathetic, because these guys have obviously no chance of winning. They have no edge. They're selling you on the dream. They're selling young kids on the dream. It's almost like this Dan Bilzerian type guy of sports betting. And there's a ton of them, and they make so much money. And you'd be shocked on how many people sign up. You'd be shocked on who the people are who are signing up, who think they could win. I don't understand it. But that marketing game of these handicappers, whatever you want to call them, I've talked to someone who represents them, and he said to me, word for word, record, like, we can't post the record. There is no record. If they go 2-8 on their Tuesday night lock of the year slate, the Wednesday morning will show a 2-0 record on the MLB plays and just ignore the 0-8 of the other stuff. They're betting with no edge. It's an entire marketing game. They're yelling at the screen in front of the casino. Those are the people who get me the most, and they make a ton of money.
Well, I didn't know they made a ton of money. I would say maybe I'm in the wrong business, but I don't want everything that comes with all that. We had Warren Sharp on, and some of my audience was, I think, annoyed because he charges money for picks or for information, and I suppose that would make him a tout. He also has very interesting deep dives on data, but would I pay or advise my customers to pay for picks from anybody? I don't care how good your information is. If you're paying for it, the edge just basically dissipates. I mean, it's non-existent anyway for reasons we've gotten into, but nobody's information is so good that you should be paying for it for the purpose of making picks.
There are a few people out there and groups that do have public information, but it's a race to, or you could pay for it and it will win. But you need a bunch of different sports books to bet on. You need a decent sized bankroll to bet responsibly. There are a few good guys, I'd say under 10. But the logistics of it is it's usually comes with the release. So, at halftime of a game, they'll say second half play coming soon. And in 3 minutes, it'll be on like Substack or Telegram or one of these Discords. And then there's a race to get down at the number that they give. But again, Ethan, getting the proper number is the name of the game. It's not about the team. It's about the number. So if they say under 27.5 on this second half NFL total, and everyone bets it at the same time, including market movers or highly influential bettors who books respect and they're going to move the line off of, you might have 25, what you're looking at. And if the guy who's winning at 7% ROI gives you 27.5, 25 is most, it's not going to react that much, but even 26.5 is most definitely not the bet, you know? So even the ones who do win publicly, it's very, very difficult to follow. And, you know, that part of the industry is way different than the kid on the boat with the cash stack on his
or Taylor Mathis. Are you aware of who Taylor Mathis is?
No, but I do know Warren Sharp. It's a good pod.
Taylor Mathis, again, you said I would be surprised by some of the money that these touts make. I would be shocked. And her thing is she's an attractive woman. And she does these walking and talking selfie video.
I know who that is.
These bouncy videos. These bouncy videos, I will say, and you can understand what I'm saying. I just looked up her Twitter feed right now. She is eating a Sonoran dog for MNF Chargers versus Cardinals, basically putting a hot dog in her mouth as part of this hook for you to start looking at these picks. And I'm going, who are these people who are watching this and going, well, you know whose gambling advice I really trust? It's this attractive woman who is effectively burying the picks in her cleavage. She's really got my interest at heart right now, and she's given me the cutting edge information that is going to make me money. Some element of this is sad. Some element of this is unfair. Some element of this is preying on men, the range of things we're talking about. But then there is this other element where it will be hard to get people sympathetic to being separated from your money for something like that. Is it possible that this is even successful? That's absurd to me. It's crazy to me somebody would make a pick this way.
So even if they're not making the exact picks that she's giving out, she probably has some sort of sportsbook referral. So that her virality is going to make her money regardless, because she's going to send her followers to, I don't know, whatever sportsbook she's affiliated with, and then get money that way. So it's maybe not even always for, betting advice, and just more as, like you said, building the community. Let me see what she's on, and she's getting followers by, posting stuff, but then the real money is coming from other ways. And maybe she gets a kickback of the client's losses. She gets a percentage of each sign up or each first deposit. In that way, there's a ton of ways for her to make money besides maybe selling advice.
Okay, so I'm reading the bio. Sports betting content / betting analyst for DraftKings and DK Sportsbook. Iowa alum, host of the First Base Pod, journalist she's listed as. I love the idea of her in the room as this betting analyst for DraftKings, really helping them build the quant models.
As if also, if she was a quant modeler and she did have really good stuff, as if they would be the ones to give it out to the public. And the funniest,
she's like Robin Hood,
right. Any information that comes from FanDuel, DraftKings, why would they give you any data that's going to help you, right? So people are like, oh, the majority of the public are here, or there's 77% of the money is on this game, but 40% on this team, but 40% of the bets are on it. And so people think that this information is valuable, which it absolutely has nothing to do with anything. It would be valuable if you knew the profile of the customer betting and you would know the exact amounts at each line. So let's say there's a bunch of money or there's a small amount of money at 3.5, or let's say the Knicks at 5.5 tonight, and then it moves to 4.5, and then the sportsbook posts, 80% of the money is on the Knicks. Well, actually, like 1/100th of the money is on the Knicks at the proper number, which is 5.5, and then all the money is on the Knicks at 4.5. That's not the current line, by the way. But why would the sportsbook help you make an educated bet? Like they're not going to do that. So this data that they release is nonsense in the first place, and that's obviously frustrating because I get a lot of like, I think I'm going to fade the public, or all the money is here. It would be profit. Like, I want the book side. It's like, you will never know what the book side is. And even if you did, that book is not taking sharp action in the first place. So it's all recreational stuff going in at a pretty efficient number in the first place.
That makes some sense. I like the image of her with the other quants, and she's in a pantsuit with glasses on, and that's when the good information is getting discussed. And then when it's time to release bad information to the public or worthless information, that's when
puts on the bikini.
Outfits. Yeah, that's when the outfits change. That's when it gets a little bit different for the old customer, the old bettor right there. But it's, again, a wild west out there, and I don't want to seem like I'm sanctimonious about it. If I was still working for any of the major publications, I would just participate in what they were doing, because this is floating all of sports media. Sports media lost an ability to make money over time. This is the thing that has it on life support effectively. And there are good media products I like, that are funded by this. What do you think of that? What do you think of, is there a solution to that? Does there need to be some sort of correction? Do there need to be some sort of laws to hem this in? I'm not asking a specific question. I'm trying to wrestle with my own feelings on it, Eric, I like so many people involved in this stuff, promoting this stuff. I feel like there, but for the grace of God go I. I'm just in this unusual position where I don't have to do it. And I don't want to feel too judgmental about it. What would you say to me?
It's really tough, honestly, because, again, at some point it is like the bettor's responsibility to gamble responsibly, right? To bet on bet amounts that they could really afford to lose. But what's really not public is, once you're hooked, you're cooked. And I think that if they rolled it out in a way like 2024 smoking cigarettes, and, as a kid watching Marlins and Heat games, I would see tobacco-free Florida, and I think it's pretty widely accepted that, you can't advertise for cigarettes anymore on TV. You used to be able to put some models in there and have a nice car, and it looks cool to smoke. You can't do that anymore. You have the click it or ticket ads. You have the anti-drinking and driving. I think soon, I don't know when, but there's going to be some lobbying and some maybe national PSAs against it a little bit. I do think Bob is right with the advertising. I think that will eventually come back around. But I think it's so new that the addiction stories maybe aren't out there. I sent you the one from the New York Times, that there's not a lot of that content out there. And that article pretty much properly displays exactly what it looks like. The $50 bettor, the $10 bettor in 6 months is now the $3,000 bettor. And coming back around to, I cannot believe I had this much money on this sport. And that's what it looks like. But I don't know. I don't really know the direction of where it's going, as long as people, one, think that they could win, and it's advertised as it is. I think the addiction center, or the rehab, the gambling rehab, the GAs are going to be packed for a long time, let's just say.
I want to push back on what some people might say about the sports bettor and about this happening at scale. I remember Richard Hanania, who'd been on this podcast, was effectively saying, hey, loser's going to loser, basically. Loser's going to find a way to lose money doing this. Loser's going to find a way to lose doing another thing. I actually think sports betting is the odd activity where people who otherwise would have lived rich and fulfilling lives end up wrecking themselves. And it's anecdata to an extent, but there are people I know where their father wasn't a loser. He was actually quite successful, but for this. There's a famous broadcaster whose father suddenly died and left the family penniless. I'm not saying who the broadcaster is because I don't recall if he has put that information out there publicly, but he was a very successful guy, and just this was a vulnerability. There's something to the psychology of this, where somebody who is otherwise very competitive and engaged can just have this flaw that makes them lose everything. And I do think that if this becomes popularized as it's been, you're going to take people who would have lived good lives and turn that into bad lives at a certain scale. I can't prove it, but it seems so. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny that you mention a really successful person, because a lot of the people we beard behind, right, they have large losses. In order to have large losses, you've accumulated a lot of money, right? So they're wildly successful in business, or in business in general, in whatever career they're in, to be able to lose the amount that they lost. And it just doesn't translate to the discipline of gambling. You're not above getting addicted to something. And I think, if you're successful in medicine, you probably aren't successful in markets. And a lot of very, very successful people do understand that. And I think it's an unbelievable trait to have, where, okay, I'm a really, really sharp attorney, but that doesn't make me a sharp sports bettor, or I don't know medicine. I might have the connections to get the best doctor, but I don't know anything about, solving my knee problem, even though I'm one of the best attorneys in the city. So you see that I think people try and tackle this market, having a lot of success in doing other things. And then it's sometimes like, how could you possibly bet the way you do, seeing, the account that they're playing on, or that they had lost so much money on, and you're so successful in other ways of your life. I don't think anyone's above it.
Well, I think part of the problem with sports and how popular it is and how much we all consume of it, it's that phrase I like of, just enough to be dangerous. That's what my financial advisor once said to me. He said it a few times. I asked once about crypto, and it's, well, yeah, no, I know a few things about it, just enough to be dangerous. This idea that if you know a little bit about something without knowing all a bit about something, you're going to think that you're better off than you are and better able to navigate it than you are, and get into trouble. And sports does that for so many people because, hey, everybody's watching the NFL and you know things, and maybe something happens and it conforms to what your intuition was or whatever you knew. And now you know just enough to be dangerous. So right. I think it's unusual in that way.
I totally agree. One thing I want to add is, the demonstrative nature with these take shows and how you speak with such not you, but how the take artists, they speak with such certainty. I think it leads actually to some overconfidence in betting. And remember, at minus 110 to beat the odds, I have to win 52.5% of the time, right? At minus 130, I have to win 56.5% of the time. Like, the margins are so slim, and the difference between winning and losing is, a difference in a couple points over a couple hundred games, right? And I think when you have these talk shows that make these guarantees, and they're making an absolute guarantee that this team is going to win, when there's $100 million wagered on this NFL game across the world, and the line is like a dead pick'em. So, they're making them 50% to win, and you're giving the certainty that, here's, I don't know if you want to attach a probability to it, they're 90% to win, but they're most definitely not, minus 900 on the market. So, I think that's interesting too, just the way that sports are argued and talked about, which it almost leads, I think, overconfidence in one's own, take, I guess, which translates to the gambling.
This might seem silly, but have you watched the movie Uncut Gems?
Yeah.
So I think people would watch that and think that's a gritty depiction of sports gambling reality. but it's actually not. It's fantasy. Yes, you can't have Julia Fox be your beard and just be slapping down bets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars at the casino. Or am I wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think the main bet, if I remember, I haven't seen the movie in a while, was like they didn't consult with anyone who knew anything about gambling because it was like a correlated parlay or something that you couldn't combine. I forgot what it was, but I remember thinking like there's not even a sports book that would take this specific bet that they advertised in the movie. But no, that's not how it is at all. Not even close.
It's not true that if you have a girlfriend who looks like a neophyte gambler, that you can just put hundreds of thousands of dollars into a purse and just place a bet. Well, everybody can do away with that dream, just like they can perhaps do away with the dream of Taylor Mathis being a quant expert who's giving you the best information around. But hey, it's still a good movie. I'm not saying that it's a bad movie. It does get at something real regarding the psychology of sports betting. But no, it doesn't. It's sad. I mean, I hope that we're not depressing you too much, oh listener, oh viewer, because yeah, I think there is this fantasy that even if you couldn't be a sports gambler, even if you don't regard yourself as somebody who would want to make it a job, people do have that buying a lottery ticket fantasy of, oh, if I just had this one big score, this one big bet. They don't even let you really do that. It's really hard to be able to do that. And so they just don't give us a lot of outs, these sports books in this age right now.
It's extremely difficult. And even if you have very, very strong, let's say, NBA props, and you win them at, 15% ROI, which is pretty much possible with props, you have to find a bunch of accounts across the world to bet them under. You can't just use your own name in DraftKings. The second you run that up a little bit at their max limit, they're going to, which might be 500. I'm not exactly sure. It really depends. But again, the first sign of competency, the first sign of this guy knows what he's doing. Maybe he's quicker than us with the technology he's using, or maybe his algorithm's better or his information's good. The second they know that, you're a winner, they're not interested in your business anymore. You're not their target. So instead of sharpening their lines, they're like, well, you're done. Here's $1. And now, you could have the best model for betting NBA props, but that's not the struggle. The struggle isn't winning. The struggle is being able to bet them. And for enough money that you could sustain a living doing it.
Anthony Mays, and I fear that he is a degenerate because he has an explanation of what's wrong with the movie about Adam Sandler. He's betting the halftime and full-time scores on a single parlay card, which a casino would never take because that's a correlated bet. Also, the limits in most casinos are 10K to 20K max, and that's for the Super Bowl, not a first round playoff series. There you go. Uncut gems, bit of a gambling plot hole. Right there.
Yeah, I might have said same game parlay, but I did mean it's correlated.
So this is a technical question, but getting the bet down is its own particular cat and mouse game skill. Is it uncorrelated from the skill in finding an edge, or are there people who are just amazing at getting bets down who are not good at finding an edge and doing the sort of quant work necessary to bet wisely?
I think it could be correlated, but mostly there's someone who's physically placing the bets, and then there's someone who's originating the bets. So that's usually two different people. The originator, the quant guy, isn't always the same person. Sometimes that bet gets sent to the person whose responsibility it is to get X amount down at X line on that play. That's usually how it works, but it could be the same guy. But there's definitely a skill in both, and that's why there's sort of like the math of sharp betting, but it really is an art because you have to win the cat and mouse game. You have to figure out, how to get around limits, how to bet as early as possible and for as much as possible.
I think this is the big looming question people want to know, because this came up with DeJounte Porter. He got punished because it looked like he was playing in such a way that he was Donaghying himself. what are your thoughts regarding this explosion of sports betting happening? Can the games be rigged? Can players figure out a way to make money off their own activities, like a Black Sox scandal from a century ago? Or is there a reason that this is a more efficient market than what was, and this really can't happen at any sort of large scale?
It's a good question, and it's very interesting because I think the sports betting being legal and the books actually being in cahoots with the leagues is probably best for the league's integrity. There's many examples like that one, which might go against popular opinion. But if you go to the guy who claimed he had, I forgot what it was, but it was an Alabama baseball game not too long ago, I want to say within the last 2 years, and he thought the game was rigged, or he heard that someone was throwing it. And, he went to the sports book, no profile, and said, I want the max amount of money on Alabama money line. There's no way that they're losing. I know for a fact they're not going to lose. And this is college baseball where the limits are $100 to $500.
Yeah.
You can't really get any money down on that, or any good money down there. I don't really even know anyone who models it because of how small the market is, right? So the ecosystem works where if you're trying to rig a college baseball game, it would have to be worth it for all parties involved. So you couldn't pay a player enough to then make up for that plus some by betting it. So not only does, I don't think the cost benefit doesn't add up, but also the sports book is immediately flagging that and immediately going to the NCAA. And there has been precarious behavior reported in the last few years that, like the Jonte Porter one, they'll see that immediately. Like, who is Jonte Porter? I don't think anyone knows, even, the guys who follow the NBA the most and bet the smallest props, that's a nobody. And for there to be so much money on him and all at the same time, it's an immediate red flag. And it's actually like really, really easy for them to see, wow, okay, this is not good. Like, something is up here. I remember hearing Billy Walters, who's one of the best gamblers ever, if not the best, a very famous one. He said there was a college basketball scandal. I want to say Arizona State or Arizona, back in not too long ago, maybe the 90s. There was like a Netflix show about it, or an episode on a show about it. Didn't watch it, but he said he knew based off the betting activity that there was something going on because he's monitoring the market and there's, no new information being released. Like the trend's not leaning any way, and all of this money is coming on one side. And so I think, the sports books seeing who's betting what at what time and for how much, they don't even have to take the bet, by the way. If you remember, I sent you that screenshot of a bet I was trying to make on a player to go to a separate team. Bet ended up losing, but I typed in my bet and they said, hold on a second. One, we're not taking this. Then they changed the line and re-offered me that bet at, 1/10 of the limit at a way different line. That would have lost, funny enough. But again, so if one guy types in, deposits as much money as he can, let's call it 100,000, and bets on Jonte Porter's points under, the sportsbook doesn't have to take that. It's going to load the bet. So not only are you not going to be able to get that bet in, but now like they know something's going on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It at least restores some faith in the integrity of the game, even if it's all awash in the sports betting money. And somebody like a Jonte Porter probably feels like, well, the fans are getting in on this and there's nothing as sacred that maybe I should get in on it. It does have its own protections. That whole futures aspect is weird, though, when it's a trade or when it's the draft, right? I find that to be, because somebody's got to know. Like somebody, right. Unlike the game itself, nobody knows exactly how the football game is going to go, but somebody knows who they're going to take with the third pick, or, that's, what do you think about that?
For sure. So when I first started, that was some of my best work, honestly, was NFL and NBA draft, because people do know it will get out. And at that point in time, you could bet a lot more money than you can now. They slash limits everywhere. You know, what I once could bet on, you know, Anthony Edwards going number 1 overall, I could probably bet 1/20th of that now. And it was funny last year, I think it was Shams who had or 2 years ago with Brandon Miller, there was like a mistweet and then a late change of mind. And everyone's like, this guy's working for the books. He's setting, and I'm like, there's not enough money that they're taking on these props that would ever make it worth it for Shams. Like there's not real money to be made on the draft. It's probably, you know, betting, let's say Brandon Miller, like over under 2.5, whatever his slot was, or Paolo, I think was like over under 2 or 1.5, right? The maximum you could bet on that is probably close to like 1/1000th of an NBA game. So, you know, the public's freaking out about the integrity being questioned and potential, like he's working with the books, but they don't care. Their draft handle is not a lot. They're not worried about it. And that's just sort of like in my opinion, a pretty big misconception.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess the last thing I'll ask you about, there's this popularization now of gambling on politics. And I was thinking about it. Oh, should I get a bet down? And then I go, I don't know. It's got that self-limiting aspect, which is maybe good, that it's one big event every 4, maybe 2 years. So you make a bet and then you're just waiting for weeks for it to pay off like a futures, and to say nothing of the weird psychology of this actually mattering versus sports. What do you make of it? Are you getting into that at all? Do you want to make bets on politics?
I love it. I think it actually keeps me involved in otherwise where I'm like pretty apolitical and independent, but it has me, you know, rooting for my bet, which at this point, it's funny because I get asked a lot, like, who's going to win the election? And I'm like, well, I actually have both sides. I had Trump, which I bet a couple years ago at a really good number. And then I have Harris at a really good number. So luckily for me, I'll be profitable no matter who wins. But again, it's like, that's the question I really don't love answering, because when I say I'm betting Trump, like I have a Trump ticket from like late 2021, where, you know,
he was at his nadir of people.
Exactly. And like the current price on Kamala, I think might be, as of like yesterday, plus 130. And I have plus 180 or 160 actually. And so it's like, I'm not telling you to bet Harris, but I have a price that doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? I have a price that's better than the market. I do not like the current price, but I am on her. And so what I struggle with when people ask me, you know, who do I like? It's like, I like this person at this number. You know, I don't like Trump at the current number. I like Trump before. You know, I like the Warriors at if I could get 42.5 over under for the season, I would love it. I do not like 45.5. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just number attached to team, number attached to politician. And one thing I noticed with the big divide in political betting is a lot of emotions, way more than sports, into that, which is really funny because I'm an idiot for betting Trump, and I'm even stupider for betting the other side. So I always, that was a fun little observation, how it's like, you know, if I bet the Jets and you're a huge Dolphins fan, I must be doing something right. But the second I bet against your party, I'm a dumbass.
Well, that is perhaps a market inefficiency to be taken advantage of, how people feel about politics. And in Nate Silver's book, he wrote about the people who, the night of the 2020 election, when it was clear that the mail-in votes would wipe away the edge that Trump had in some of these blue wall states, that this guy with a big bankroll was just betting. He was just betting and betting. And I think it might have been a 90-10 proposition at that point. And he's going, this is just free money. Am I allowed to do this? And he was just on predict it, cleaning up. And yes, if you wanted to risk that 10-1, when it was just factually, this is how the election is going, because there was just enough of a 10% of people bought in who did not want to let it go despite the information. And I wonder that now when I'm looking at some of the early vote data as it trickles out, where I'm looking at it and I'm going, will there be a point at which this is just 100% eventuality in some of these states where we might be 2 days from the election, but you're going to have that 20% clinging on that you can just bet into and bet against? I don't have the kind of bankroll or the inclination to really test it out, but that's a thought that has crossed my mind as we're in this whole new world era with politics, A, because there's betting, and B, they've expanded early voting to such a degree, and there's so much information from some of these states that it's just very new, and there are probably opportunities for people who are inclined to take advantage of this new terrain.
Huge opportunities in political betting, I would say, right now. Funny enough, I remember vividly in 2020, I knew multiple people who made multiple millions of dollars betting that there were a lot of people post-election that thought Trump was going to be in office after he lost. And people were willing to bet a lot of money. It was rigged. Like, he's going to be in office in January, when the inauguration, it's going to be Trump that's inaugurated. And this is, early December, late January, even early January. And a lot of very, very wealthy people had that opinion, which goes back to, you could be very smart and sharp in one thing and maybe way too emotional in another. But I know for a fact that was a huge, like, people were like, wait, you think Trump's going to be the president? Like, I'm happy to, let's exchange some information here, and you could bet it, and let's see what happens. But people were betting large amounts of money on that. When it was probably as close to 0% chance as possible.
Yeah, it's fast. Right now, I'm just watching some of the people respond to the early vote data, and there's clearly data that is positive for one side in some of these situations and negative for the other side. But you see very smart people who are so emotionally invested that when it's negative, they just immediately come up with some sort of rationalization. And we're just these amazing rationalization machines. Right now, a lot of the early vote data is good for Trump, but we'll see what comes out over the next couple of weeks. I'm just merely making the observation that there's stuff that comes out that, regardless, you could say that this is not going to ultimately tell the tale, and you don't know till you know, and we'll see when we see. But there's bad news that comes out for one side, and they go, "Oh my God, it's actually good news," and it's just amazing. Yeah. It's just amazing to see that capacity. And that's not to say that we exactly know what's going to happen at the moment. Right. I don't necessarily want to be involved in the prediction game there either. It's just funny to watch the psychology take place.
Absolutely. And it's funny because on Polymarket, I think there's, I don't know, maybe $1 billion wagered. That's a very efficient market. It might be 100 million, not a billion, but it's a lot. It's definitely over 100 million. I mean, it's easy to check if you just look. But the tribalism in sports is dwarfed by the tribalism in politics, and it's not even close. And I was joking with some friends. I'm like, hey, would you bet Kamala if you could get on Polymarket if they gave you like 4-1? No, she can't win. And Kamala right now is, I don't know, maybe plus 120, plus 125 today. And if they could bet plus 400, if the market said plus 125 and I'm offered a plus 400, I'd have a disproportionate amount of my bankroll on that. It would be a very large bet, but not to some people who, are mega bulls on one side or so tribalistic that they can't see just basic math says that regardless of your party, or who you support, this is very plus EV. But that doesn't exist in political betting for the most part.
It's very complicated because these states just have different data points. I mean, it's a decentralized system. So some of these states, voting is just done differently than other states. And then that can have some effect regardless of the public sentiments. I think the way Pennsylvania is set up, regardless of what the public in let's say the public in Pennsylvania felt the exact way about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris as the public in Florida feels. Let's just say that that's the case as sort of a hypothetical. I think the way they do voting in Florida is more beneficial to Trump than the way they do voting in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, they do mass mail-ins and they don't do early in-person voting. I think there are some technicalities where a little of it might happen, but in Florida, they've got 10 days of early in-person voting, 14 in the big counties, and for whatever reason, and people might be able to come up with their theories, Republicans like to do that. They like to vote in person, and so if you extend your window of days people are showing up early in person to vote, that seems to benefit the Trump side, and Pennsylvania doesn't have that. So I'm only raising this to say that all these states do things in their own different ways. Some of them have crazy information out there. You can know up to the minute what the racial breakdown is of voters in North Carolina. I believe civil rights law might be part of why you can do this in some of the southern states where you know that kind of thing. And then in other states, you have no window into the party affiliation or the ethnicity or any of this stuff, or you have to trust some sort of voter file modeler. So it's just, yeah, to know it all and how it all patches together, I think is a heavy lift. And that's not something that I can necessarily figure out with a great degree of confidence as a humble Substack proprietor.
Totally. I definitely think there's large edges to be had on these sites who are taking election bets. I will say I'm not too well versed, honestly. But I think it is the potentially only singular event where if you get the public opinion, I think it might be slightly profitable to just fade whatever you think the public thinks. Whereas in a sporting event, I would never say that's the case. But I just say that here because there are large wagers on Polymarket, and it's been written about that potentially are influencing the line or the percentages, $20-30 million deposits. So I think big whales could swing the market there. So I'm not too familiar, but I do think that when one thing happens, super pro-Trump, buying the other side low is probably pretty good here, and vice versa. When everyone is, it seems like for Kamala, I think buying low on Donald, it's a pretty good idea. I wouldn't recommend that for anything in sports, but here it might be solid.
I mean, there are overlaps.
Not financial advice.
Yeah, there are overlaps and certainly similarities, but the way they're set up, it's different. And at least again with politics, there's not that everyday potential where you can just keep on making bets. Look, man, this was a fascinating conversation. I really appreciated you doing this. What do you want to promote? I know you want to promote your Twitter handle. I know that you're charging $100 a month to tout bets, and everybody should pay for that. And that's something that you also want to promote. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Eric, what should we be looking out for?
Not much, honestly. Maybe follow me on Twitter. I'll start tweeting a little bit. It's HL Insight. As I explained, the username came from Happy Lebronica, which was like my AIM name back in the day, spin off of Happy Hanukkah. But yeah, just Twitter, and maybe I'll start tweeting some information or some stuff that I like, and maybe we'll do this again.
I would love to, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ethan.